All right, I'm starting recording. And we are broadcasting now.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of you being here and having this necessary and important conversation. But most of all, for wanting to do something about it and make a change in our communities. I was blown away to see that we have 150 people registered for this event. It just goes to show that we are ready to make change together. And I also want to say thank you to all of the team members from the Lesniak Institute and from Kean University who are working behind the scenes right now to make sure that our event is going seamlessly. So thank you guys. Our event is not about raising awareness. Well, we will do that a little bit. Our event is about driving action, teaching you paths to action, and creating a network to connect you to all of our wonderful speakers here. And that's where the Social Justice Network comes in, to provide as a hub, to make us connected and ensure that we're able to make this movement last more than just today, that it lasts for weeks and months to come. Now, I don't want to take too much time away from the meat and bones of the event, so let me just cover some logistics. First, to our speakers, you're all automatically muted. So when it's your turn to speak, make sure you click the unmute button. Also, during the panel discussion, if you would like to chime in, just send a chat in the chat box and we'll make sure to facilitate that. Now to our attendees. If you want to submit a question, we have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You'll see it's right there in the middle. So we're going to be getting to the question and answer portion at around 2:30, and that's when we'll take some of your questions. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Repollet. Dr. Repollet is breaking barriers. First, as the first Black principal at Carteret High School, then as the first Black commissioner of education for the Department of Education in New Jersey, and now as the first Black president of Kean University. Dr. Repollet believes that we have a moral obligation to break down systems and policies that reinforce systemic racism. As commissioner, he worked to redesign the Department of Education to strengthen teaching, learning, and increase educational equity among all students in New Jersey. We're honored to have him here with us, and we're honored to work with him as the new Kean University president. Thank you, Dr. Repollet. The stage is yours. Dr. Repollet, make sure you unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and hello. Senator Lesniak, Senator Greenstein, Assemblyman Conway, Assemblywoman Sumter, Mr. Kofis, my partner in crime, Ms. Carnavaca, and Ms. Berger. I'm honored to join you today, and thank you to Ms. Mack for the invitation to join this conversation to combat systemic social inequities. I am humbled and grateful for the opportunity to join this discussion, especially this distinguished group of individuals. I can't imagine a more critical time to engage in this conversation. We stand at a pivotal moment in history, uprising across the nation inspired by the tragic and unjust deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, Elijah McClain, and so many others have raised our energetic focus on issues of equity and race. Fueled by the inequities laid bare by COVID-19, Americans are calling for change and addressing the legacy of slavery as a stain on our democracy. As public discourse shifts momentously, an extraordinary opportunity is arising to move the needle towards a more just and equitable world. When I became Commissioner of Education, one of the first things I did was center equity within the conversation and work streams in the Department of Education. Both personally and professionally, joint journeys fostered a deep understanding of inequities that impact the lives of so many others. For example, when we look at academic outcomes, we see that too many students of color are not yet thriving in schools. Opportunity gaps to continue to create obstacles to successful Black and brown students. I say opportunity gap intentionally. You may be familiar with the term achievement gap, but to me, achievement isn't the problem. What our students need is an opportunity in the form of equitable access. When we can confidently say that educational systems are fair and that all of our students enjoy equitable access to opportunities for learning and advancement, then I have no doubt that all of our students will achieve academic success. Many of you are probably familiar with Michelle Alexander, the civil rights lawyer, legal scholar, and author of The New Jim Crow. Professor Alexander argues that unequal educational opportunities and the school-to-prison pipeline are part of the cage that she uses as a metaphor to describe structural racism. She strikes a strikingly clear connection between education and the criminal justice system, an example from a report published by the Advancement Project. The report showed that one of the earliest examples of zero tolerance language in school discipline manuals was cut and pasted from the US Drug Enforcement Administration manual. That's right, the DEA. When creating a policy for school discipline for children, we sometimes think of systems in our society as separate and distinct, but the fact that bird's cage described by Michelle Alexander is really like a bird's nest, intricate and deeply interwoven. A logical extension of school discipline policies modeled after adult criminal justice policies is the proliferation of police in schools, according to the Federal Department of Education civil rights data. 1.4 million students in the United States attend schools with police officers, but no counselors. 3 million students attend schools with police officers, but no nurses. And a staggering 10 million students attend schools with police officers, but no social work. When schools are structured this way, how can we expect a different outcome? William Edwards Deming, the engineering and management consultant who was an early expert on systems thinking, famously said, "Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. If we want different outcomes, our systems must be altered." As important it is to keep our fellow citizens out of prison, it is critical that we expedite the parole process and streamline reentry so that citizens returning are able quickly to assume their place in society. I applaud Senator Cunningham and Assemblywoman Sumter for sponsoring the Earn Your Way Out Act and Governor Murphy for signing into law. And I'm amazed by John's tireless effort to support returning citizens. It is truly an honor to sit virtually among giants on this panel. All of you have done heroic work to bring systemic inequities to light. And I know that together as a network, we will pave a path to achieve progress towards the just and equitable society that seems closer than ever than before within our reach. So now I have the honor of introducing our host here today, who really needs no introduction, my friend, longtime friend of Kean University, and a leader in New Jersey legislature for several decades, Senator Raymond J. Lesniak. Senator Lesniak founded the Lesniak Institute for Advocacy because he saw the need for an institution that teaches action-driven advocacy. In addition to awareness, we're delighted here at Kean to host this event and to be a part of these important discussions and initiatives. Senator Lesniak, the floor is yours, sir.
Unmute. There we go. There we go. Well, it's a great honor for me to be the first person that President and Dr. Repollet has introduced as president of Kean University. I want to ask everybody to give President Repollet a big hand for joining us at Kean University. You're so welcome. So welcome. And so much needed to carry on the mantle that was started by Dr. Ferrari. So today's effort is one of a series of events that we expect to have a discussion on social inequalities. There's been a great focus on police reform and police brutality, which is absolutely and totally necessary. But we have to go beyond that. We have to go to the core of social inequalities that Dr. Repollet spoke about. There are three specific areas that we've outlined for today, but there are many, many more. And I urge, and I'm sure everyone will have things to say about other areas that we want to discuss. We want to talk about Earn Your Way Out, the most significant criminal justice reform that has passed in America today. We want to talk about wraparound community schools to provide education from pre-K to 3, not just pre-K, excuse me, prenatal. Deborah, how come you didn't correct me? Prenatal to 3, the most significant time in a child's ability to learn. And Stacy Berger will talk about the need for affordable housing. And that's just the beginning. So it's my honor to present our first speaker, the Assembly sponsor and of many other important initiatives, Assemblywoman Shavonna Sumter. Assemblywoman Sumter has served in the New Jersey General Assembly since 2012. She's currently the chairwoman of the Community Development and Affairs Committee. She sponsored bills that require attention to and the understanding of racial disparities and equality. Most recently, she has passed a package of bills through her committee addressing police reform. She was the sponsor of Earn Your Way Out while she was in the Assembly. Assemblywoman Sumter.
Thank you, Senator Lesniak, and thank you to all who are on this Zoom meeting. Protocol has been established. I see Governor McGreevey has also joined us. Always happy to see his nice tortoiseshell frame glasses there. But truly, Senator Lesniak has been a champion for social justice and rights restoration. Today, I want to take a moment, if I may have permission, Senator Lesniak, to just do a happy dance, because yesterday was July 7th. And on July 7th, for the first time since 1844 in the state of New Jersey, persons who were on probation and parole voted for the first time since 1844. Let's give a round of applause for that. It's over 80,000 people who have been impacted this November. Please spread the word. I know it's a number of people on this Zoom meeting today, so please let people know it is now legal for them to vote. Back in January of this year, our Governor Phil Murphy, on Martin Luther King's birthday, Dr. Repollet mentioned the civil unrest that America is faced with, and we're not without our stains of sin with slavery and unjust use of force. But on Martin Luther King's birthday of 2020, Governor Murphy signed into law the Earn Your Way Out bill. Now this bill, it was S761, sponsored with Senator Cunningham. It shrinks the number of prisoners in our system for nonviolent offenses. It's necessary at this time, especially with the pandemic, that we release as many people as possible so they have an opportunity at a healthy life. It also streamlines the parole process. It prepares individuals for reentry, where they'll receive social services and medical services, mental health services, social work services, help with finding employment, as well as apartment assistance throughout their time incarcerated. So when they're released, we start this process early. They can get started on beginning their new life. COVID-19 created a barrier to the expeditious movement of this bill. Was effective in April of this year, and that's when New Jersey was hit horrifically by the pandemic. So we're really pushing to make sure that those persons who are eligible for early parole through this bill have an opportunity to earn their way out. My partners and I, including Senator Lesniak, while he's no longer in the legislature, but Senator Greenstein's on this call, as well as Assemblyman Conaway, and of course, a Councilwoman, I'm about to elevate her, Patricia Augusti, who's a great, great friend in the work that we do, are all on this Zoom meeting. It's important that we can continue to advocate for those whose voices may not be heard over the noise. We're long overdue in righting some of the structural and systemic harms where more African Americans have been incarcerated at a rate of 4 times to 1 of a white person for the same crime. We need to close the wealth disparity gap where African Americans earn up to $3,000 in savings as opposed to close to $300,000 of a white American in the state of New Jersey. We can change the structural and systemic harms with a double down effort as we look to what America in New Jersey will be for the next few decades. Let's look at a new normal, because guess what? The old normal was not so great. So I'm looking forward to being a part of the change that we want to see for a long-standing future for our people and our children and our futures, and for everyone to thrive and survive in our great state of New Jersey. So thank you, Senator Lesniak, for keeping this issue at the forefront, because we're no ways done with the work yet.
Okay, thank you, Assemblywoman, and thank you for your wonderful work that you continue to do. You were a great partner when I was in the Senate to be over there in the Assembly to move our, oops, my dogs. I got to put my dogs away.
They agree with what you're saying.
All right, Penny and Sammy. All right, now I have a great opportunity to introduce Deborah Kornavaca. Deborah and I have been working to try to get community-based schools going for pre-K to 3, and I'm hoping that this Zoom will help to jumpstart that effort again. Deborah serves as Deputy Chief of Staff of Outreach for Governor Murphy. She previously served as a statewide organizing expert at the New Jersey Education Association. She specializes in building statewide campaigns and coalition building with educators, advocacy organizations, parents, faith-based leaders, and community members. Deborah's work includes both issue and electoral campaigns, ranging from community schools to the gubernatorial race. And now please unmute me so we can hear Deborah Kornavaca.
Thank you so much, Senator Lesniak, for the opportunity to be here today and to join you and your puppies. I see he's gone off to tend to them. And to this esteemed group of presenters, I'm thrilled to be with you all. Senator Lesniak's areas of social and economic justice work have been so essential to the state of New Jersey for so long, and we wouldn't be where we are today without his continued advocacy and championing so many issues long before they were popular. And we wouldn't be having this discussion today if not for your continued leadership, Senator. So thank you very much for having me and for your continued leadership. To President Repollet, just a moment of personal privilege or mourning. Thank you for hosting this at your university. It is a thrill to see you in your new role, but we do miss you already over at the Department of Education and the Murphy administration. We thank you so much for your time there. To my fellow presenters, to each and every one of you who have inspired and motivated and sometimes challenged and guided me, I want to thank you for the contributions you make to the discussions like this. Especially, I want to thank the strong women who are here today, Senator Greenstein, Assemblywoman Sumter, Renee, Stacy, and others. Each of you have carved a path for me and so many other women to walk down in the world of politics and policy. And we know that we need more women in this space. And I'm so grateful for your sisterhood and your support, your mentorship and your leadership. We meet today to have this timely conversation about how to combat systemic social inequities at the confluence of the devastating pandemic and the long overdue reckoning with the racist past and present of our country. A country that has for centuries become complacent and complicit in the systemic racism that goes back to the founding of this nation. We live it every day, but we don't teach it, we don't acknowledge it, and we don't address it. And so I believe strongly that we do need to say their names. George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, Breonna Taylor just recently, but those of us of an age remember Philandra Castile, Akai Gurley, Tanisha Anderson, and many, many more. We know how Eric Garner died in an illegal chokehold, but maybe not as many people know how his daughter Erica died. She died within a year of giving birth to her second child, in what is an all too common reality for Black women in this state and in this country, maternal mortality. Pregnancy and giving birth is exponentially more dangerous for a woman of color than for me and other white women like me. So we have a confluence of a crisis, an indiscriminate virus that yet seems to discriminate against communities of color more harshly in outcomes, and structural racism that has compounded the impact of the virus. But it's also created that structural racism long-standing health crises within the Black and Latino communities in our country. So there's a deep moral responsibility and urgency to act to address these daunting challenges. It is not enough to recognize them. If we recognize them and do not act, in my opinion, it is almost worse than not recognizing them. So with the recognition comes an obligation to figure out how to act. But there's also opportunity, because we absolutely know that there are steps we can make to make progress. We cannot solve these problems overnight, but nor should we be paralyzed by the daunting task ahead of us. We may take every step possible to make progress together. So before I discuss community schools specifically, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge right away the work of First Lady Tammy Murphy to address maternal health and infant mortality across the state of New Jersey, in partnership with many of you who are on this meeting today. Our state is really blessed to have her focus on this critical issue, her talents and knowledge committing to supporting solutions for women of color throughout their pregnancy and childbirth and their years of parenting. It is a critical piece of the work that we need to do, as is the Murphy administration's expansion of pre-K across the state into both high needs and wealthier districts, because there are people who need these services across the state in every community. But the solution that I want to speak about today, is to the Senator referenced, is community schools. The strategy is not new, and in fact, there is substantial empirical evidence from across the country, including here in New Jersey, where we have community schools, of the ability of community school strategies to address inequities, to lift up educational outcome, and to support students and families. Rather than unrealistically expect teachers in the classroom to address the full needs of a child, community school places the support of the whole family in the heart of the school and brings resources to students and families in a way that can allow the child to thrive and succeed. What it looks like in any particular community depends on the needs of the community, and a needs assessment is often at the foundation of developing a good community school strategy. But it rests on a set of 6 pillars that work. Each one in isolation will make improvements. When done together, they can be pivotal and transformative. Strong, proven, and diverse curriculum, high quality teaching from diverse teachers who look like the community, reflect and represent the diversity of the community, inclusive leadership where parents and community have a seat at the table, positive behavior practices rather than negative discipline, family and community partnerships, engaging in community in the schools, and then community support services. These pillars might sound basic, they might sound foundational to education, but they're not often fully implemented or done in schools. Support services is the one that's most widely talked about and often referred to as wraparound services. And that is where we have to acknowledge in this day and age that a mother, a pregnant mother, perhaps with a child in school, or with maybe it's their first child, the sooner they become familiar with and create a relationship with the school, the better the chances of that school becoming a positive relationship in that family's life and supporting the child through education. So wraparound services may provide after-school activities, mentoring, meals for students, whatever those needs are. Support services, most effectively run out of a family resource center attached to a school, can provide access for medical care for a student or the family, housing or food support, job seeking or language skills for parents and family members, all under one roof attached to the school. This makes it easy and convenient. It is in a trusted place, and it puts the services right there accessible for a family. Imagine, if you will, a pregnant mother dropping her first child off at school, being able to get a prenatal checkup right next door in the family resource center. Or if she's not feeling quite right, but doesn't want to take a bus ride to the doctor, being able to go in there and get advice and counsel. Or perhaps a parent is asked to come pick up a child from the school early because they have a fever, but the family has no doctor. Especially in this period of pandemic, the ability to go to a family resource center and get the basics checked out, or a referral to medical help, who will then be able to address the medical need, might be what prevents COVID from spreading. It could really be the difference between life and death. So as we think about community schools, right now the traditional building is maybe pre-K through elementary, middle, high school, but we need to, as the senator said, expand that vision to include the pregnant parent, the family emerging, the first-time family, and how to welcome them into the school community from before day one, from before they have a child of school age, to create that relationship, to offer them a one-stop place where they can go that is trusted, that has resources that will support them, not shame them, and then help them support their children through education. The piece of that is so critical, but I don't want to underestimate the importance of the other pillars before I end, because they really do play a pivotal role in the way we address anti-racist education. If we think about for a minute the need to have our teachers reflect the children that we teach in terms of where they come from, where they live, and what they look like. If we think about what it means to have a culturally appropriate curriculum that doesn't teach white colonialism, but teaches the struggle of the peoples in the communities from where they lived, these pieces of education are part of an anti-racist agenda. And in order for us to address inequities in maternal health, in mortality rates, in the impact of COVID, we have to begin to teach these things in our school so our next generation is equipped with a different set of tools. And these things exist in New Jersey across many parts in our districts, across the landscape right now, from Atlantic City up to Patterson and many places in between. The challenge we have is the courage to talk to our districts right now about implementing pieces of this, not all at once, but pieces of this where we can begin to make impact and change. The legislature and the state can support this. It can release restrictions on funding. It can find new title money that can be used, but mostly this has to come from a community effort to push into our schools and to demand that the schools reflect the needs of our community, what our community looks like, what our community expects from schools, and then to support the whole family in the education process. Together, we can really make a difference implementing this. We can impact people's lives from before they're born, from the time they go off and graduate into college. And I hope that while the tragedies that are unfolding in front of us today are painful to look at, we see this as an opportunity for positive change. And I know many on the meeting with us today have been huge advocates for community schools, no more than anyone, Senator Lesniak. So I thank you for the chance to be here today and talk briefly about this. Thank you, Senator.
Well, thank you, Deborah, for being such a forceful advocate. I'm going to put you on a spot because what we need to do, all of us, is to ensure that the legislature and Governor Murphy make this a priority. And by the time, again, when we have our next forum, we're going to ask everybody to report back to us on what's the status of the legislation. So all the legislators on there, beware. And it's not a incredibly costly endeavor, because many of the resources are already there and coordinators are needed. That there's an expense, but we have to find that, because this is the most, I believe, one of the most significant criminal justice, social inequality relieving initiatives that exist today. So we're going to stay on top of it. Great presentation, Deborah. And now my partner in reducing crime, John Kufos. And I'm glad John is on the other side of most of us here. I guess, John, you would be called a conservative. Is that fair?
I'm a registered independent, so it depends on the issue.
but we have had tremendous, this is, criminal justice reform is not a Democrat or Republican issue, as none of these issues ought to be. And we've had great support from John. John has served as the National Director of Reentry Initiatives at Right on Crime since 2017. As the Executive Director of the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, he is dedicated to giving returning citizens access to critical resources. Using his experience as a formerly incarcerated individual, I did not know that. You're going to have to share some of that with us. He became a lawyer to aid formerly incarcerated individuals through pro bono work with clearing up unpaid fines and warrants and assisting in obtaining documentation of driver's license, all incredible impediments to a successful reentry. So you were so forceful and important with us getting Earn Your Way Out passed. We want to hear what your views are on the implementation of Earn Your Way Out and the future of criminal justice reform in New Jersey. John?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you to all the legislators on the phone. Deborah, it's good to see you again as well. Thank you and your office with the governor for all you're doing. And of course, Governor McGreevey, none of what I've achieved would be possible without Governor McGreevy's leadership. When I was released from prison, which I'll get into in a second, I had a small idea to help some people get identification, driver's licenses, and to handle fines and fees issues, which crippled Black and brown communities, candidly. And Governor McGreevy was in the process of forming the New Jersey Reentry Corporation and gave me an opportunity to be a piece of that from 2014 to 2017. So to Jim, I thank you in particular.
And more importantly, I introduced you to your wife.
That's true. That's true. He did introduce me to my wife. So, and if we're making a political joke, I guess, if you want to turn someone conservative, just hang out with Governor McGreevy long enough, and then you'll run from the Democratic Party. But I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. So I'm going to take you guys back just a little bit to give you a piece of my journey. In January of 2012, I was arguing before the New Jersey Supreme Court. I was a certified criminal trial attorney and had all the outward material successes one could have. And it was my first time arguing before the New Jersey Supreme Court. I'm arguing the biggest search and seizure case of the session. And the only thing I could think of was that I was out on bail. I was out on $150,000 bail while I made that argument before the New Jersey Supreme Court in State versus Sharif Edmonds. And I would finish that case, plead guilty to a hit and run that I tried to lie my way out of. My 20-year battle with alcoholism came to a conclusion with nearly fatal results for somebody else. And thank the Lord that person recovered and lived. Nothing I did helped that. And I went to prison for that. I did my time at a place called Bayside State Prison. I found sobriety along the way, which I'm incredibly blessed with. I never knew that I would work in criminal justice reform. When I was practicing law, although I was, I chaired the legal redress committee for the NAACP, Metuchen Edison area branch. I did many, many civil rights cases pro bono. I never expected to work in reform. As I sat in Bayside State Prison and I watched people leave for halfway houses, leave on parole, or get denied parole, and then were sent right back for those that left because they had an old fine, fee, warrant, didn't have ID, couldn't get a job, all these technical violations. As a former attorney, I realized that there was a really easy way to fix this, which is to get the bar involved. When I got out, I had no home. That was foreclosed upon. I moved in with a law school roommate and had a job, thankfully, reviewing documents at a company who I knew through a friend. Along the way, I had a chance meeting with Governor McGreevy, and he shared his vision for reentry in New Jersey, and I shared my little thing I wanted to do, and he gave me that opportunity. Moving to Earn Your Way Out, it's kind of a funny story. So prior to Earn Your Way Out, the biggest piece of criminal justice legislation in this country was the First Step Act, which was signed by President Trump. And as a guy from New Jersey, in an area with not a lot of guys from New Jersey here in DC, and particularly in my dealings at the White House, I would constantly talk about all we did in New Jersey, all our reentry work, all the things we do to connect people to services. But we weren't seeing a lot of movement on legislation. So I was sort of yes to death and told to stop talking about New Jersey. And then all of a sudden, Earn Your Way Out was passed. A couple of things I just want to mention. I have the privilege of not only working with folks at the federal level, but with easily a dozen governors across our country. And the reason Earn Your Way Out can work is because of the investment this state has made in reentry infrastructure. Places like Blessed Ministries, New Jersey Reentry Corporation, VOA, and the like are leading the nation in reentry infrastructure. But the beauty in Earn Your Way Out and why it is something that is that other states now should be following, because candidly, before Earn Your Way Out, the states that really needed help should have been following the First Step Act. Earn Your Way Out, though, does so much to make sure that, number one, we incentivize good behavior. And number two, that people get out on parole who are no longer a threat to us. And listen, full disclosure, I had a very good experience with parole. I was on parole. They granted me a date, which I did not expect. But I think that the parole system as it was, where people could be hit or denied parole for almost any reason at all, if you look at the New Jersey Administrative Code, was an unworkable situation and probably contributed to that racial disparity that made New Jersey the #1 racially disparate prison in the country. So Earn Your Way Out is going to fix a lot of that because it helps the state parole people who are no longer a threat instead of just keeping people we're mad at, right? And I think that's the problem in parole across the country with folks that have parole. The other thing that it does is it forces the DOC and parole to get together to form an individualized reentry plan. Now, New Jersey has what I like to term around my office a Florida problem. So in Florida is really good at passing laws about things, but maybe not as good at implementing. And you see a lot of great legislation in Florida, and then nothing happens. What we recently saw is the Fair Release and Reentry Act of 2008 or 9, or whatever was passed, was just amended, and a new law was signed. I understand that many of the people on this call were behind that as well. The problem, though, with amending laws but not holding the agencies to task to implement means your laws that you pass are not going to be successful. So I think that the #1 way to increase success with Earn Your Way Out is to #1, ensure flawless implementation of not just Earn Your Way Out, but of the Fair Release and Reentry Act, with specifically focusing on the MVC and DOC collaboration for identification. New Jersey only has 12, 13 prisons. To give you a comparison, the state of Texas has 109 or 110 prisons, and they literally have the same cameras you'd have in your DMV in about 107 prisons. So they just make them right there. Other prisons are doing the same in much, much larger, much more expensive systems. So New Jersey can really show a value add by doing things like that, and by looping in the Motor Vehicle Commission into the reentry planning of Earn Your Way Out, by ensuring that obligation reports are not only provided at the beginning from the MVC, but that they're resolved. So one of the things that we had the privilege of building at NJRC was a partnership with the Motor Vehicle Commission and the New Jersey State Bar. And that resulted in, I think, over 400 restored driver's licenses by the time I left, and probably, tenfold that after I left. And the reason that's important is because the MVC is the best repository for all obligations that a person's going to have. And if we don't resolve those obligations before a person walks out the door, no reentry plan is going to work anyway. So that's the key part. New Jersey has the tools with Earn Your Way Out legislatively. It has the tools with the Fair Release and Reentry Act, and it has the infrastructure through a fantastic network of nonprofit providers. But what it needs is to make sure that that it is implemented in a way that makes sure that all of these little issues are handled, because it only takes one small issue in reentry to upend the whole apple cart. And I'll leave you with one thing. A couple of years ago, one of my first assignments after leaving New Jersey was to help pass a law in Mississippi. And Mississippi was there made debtors prisons with old fines and fees, but also had a tremendous parole technical violation issue, and there was no transportation to get anywhere. When I got sent to Mississippi, I actually thought someone at my new employer was mad at me, because why would you send a guy who had been to prison, is from New Jersey, not from the South, to Mississippi to advocate for a bill? So I assumed I was going to get fired and asked Governor McGreevey for my old job back within about 2 months of being there. When I got there, it was a lot like the movie My Cousin Vinny, right? So I was explaining why this should work and trying to mask my New Jersey accent. But what happened was we were able to convince Governor Bryan at the time to sign this law. And now parolees in Mississippi can literally, with the parole officer's approval, check in via FaceTime, Skype, etc. So guys and gals who are able to get jobs who are on parole don't have to leave that job to now check in. unless a person's a risk. So there's a lot of exciting legislation going on, but none is more exciting than Earn Your Way Out, followed up by this amendment of the FRRA. So now it's incumbent upon your Department of Corrections director, your MVC director, and your parole chair to implement that part flawlessly. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here with you. It's good to be around people from home again. I miss you guys a lot. And I am so happy when I see criminal justice reform coming out of my home state. And it's good because I'm surrounded by people from Texas all the time who are very patriotic about their state. So it gives me a lot to talk trash about as well. So I want to thank Senator Lesniak and Governor Murphy and the gang for giving me that privilege as well, because I was getting beat up too much. So thank you very much. And I'll be here, of course, for questions.
John, thank you very much. And John, you know that God can do for us what we can't do for ourselves.
That's right. That's right. I'm very, very, very lucky, very blessed. I have a 1-year-old daughter and a wife, of course, thanks to the Governor McGreevey introduced me to. And somehow, because Governor McGreevey knew her father, they're still friends. So I must be doing something right.
You certainly are. You certainly are. It's a great presentation. And I'm sure Senator Greenstein, as chairperson of the Senate Law and Public Safety Committee, is going to stay on top of the Corrections Department to make sure that it is implemented, and we'll be working closely with her. So now it's my honor to go to our moderator. She moderated a forum we've had in the past. She's done a great job from Kean University. Dr. Loretta Farrell is the director of the Human Rights Institute at Kean University. She is a staunch advocate for human rights, social change, voting, and equity. She has worked on major projects from increasing voter registration on campus, which she received an award for on Capitol Hill, to hosting the International Human Rights Conference, Hunger, the Politics of Food, addressing hunger and food insecurities. Dr. Farrell, where are you?
I am
There
ready.
she is. It's all yours.
Thank you, Senator Lesniak. Before I speak, though, I think we might want to hear from Stacy Berger. It's hard to keep track when we're all online.
You're on mute, Senator Lesniak.
Stacy's not going to believe I didn't do that intentionally.
I've
I am
no
so sorry.
harm. That's fine.
Oh, no. Housing is a critical component. I am so sorry. My bad. Je m'excuse. Stacy Berger serves as the president and CEO of the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey. She has worked with nonprofit grassroots organizations to develop and win organizing and advocacy campaigns on progressive issues, ranging from public financing of state elections and a millionaire's tax to the preservation of the state's 30-year commitment to providing housing opportunities for every resident in every community. Stacy, let's hear about your plan to expand affordable housing in the state of New Jersey.
Thanks, Senator. I want to thank everyone who's gone before me. I feel like I don't have a whole lot to add to the conversation because all of you have really said some amazing and really important things. I want to give a special shout out to Governor McGreevey. It's really good to be on the same Zoom with you, as well as to hello, Governor, as well as Senator Greenstein and Chairwoman Sumter. All of you, and obviously Senator Lesniak and I have done a bunch of different things over those last 30 years. And so it was actually really nice to come on and see all of these familiar faces and names. Senator Lesniak and I have not always agreed on everything, but I think our partnership to try to make sure that everyone has a safe, affordable place to call home goes back to the 2012, maybe even before that, goes back to the effort to make sure that the $75 million that came to New Jersey from the Obama administration went into the development of housing and into the budget, and not into Governor Chris Christie's budget back in the day. So we have been working together for quite a while. We also worked together on the Residential Foreclosure Transformation Act, which recently, after more than a decade, became law and was really something that Senator Lesniak championed to make sure that people communities could take underutilized homes that were in foreclosure and vacant and turn them into affordable homes for families and residents who need them. Making sure that everyone has a safe, affordable place to live is not rocket science. It doesn't take a special set of brilliant policies. It takes a political commitment to make sure that we do the right thing for all of the people who live here. And that is something that, we really believe can help address the systemic and institutional racism that our country and our state is seeing and has been experiencing. Redlining was a racist policy that moved people out of one community and segregated people based on housing. And that is something that we have worked to overcome in New Jersey. We are not there yet. New Jersey remains one of, if not the most segregated states in America. We talk about it being a very diverse place. It is both very, very diverse in the macro sense and very, very segregated at the neighborhood and community level. And unless we address NIMBYism and the way that we structure and pay for our housing systems, we are not really going to get at the systemic and institutional racism that is affecting our communities and our residents. We are the 6th most expensive place to rent an apartment in the United States. People cannot afford to keep a roof over their head. And when you have a pandemic and a global health crisis that has killed tens of thousands of people, health care and health safety and public health is really a housing crisis. We cannot expect people to shelter at home and stay at home if they cannot afford to have a home that they can live in safely. And that is really the crux of the crisis that we are seeing in New Jersey in terms of our health care and our housing and the COVID-19 crisis. And all of that has been laid bare. My colleagues at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice call it the cracks in the foundation. And they are very, they have done some very, very important research on the impact of redlining and the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on communities of color. And it is distressing to see that the numbers are what they are, that people of color, in particular Black and Latino families, are disproportionately impacted by COVID, and they are disproportionately impacted by our housing crisis. We have a president who is at this moment working to undermine the Community Reinvestment Act, which is the single biggest bulwark against redlining. We have made sure that banks over the last 40 years or 50 years have invested into communities in New Jersey and around the country, and the Trump administration, at a time when we need more of that and not less of that, is undoing that very important legislation through regulatory action. So we are working at the federal level to protect and preserve the Community Reinvestment Act. And here at home in New Jersey, we are working to make sure that everyone has a safe, affordable place to call home in a few ways. One, and Deb, who still takes all my calls and text messages and listens to me all the time, which I really appreciate. She thanked us, a number of us, for being mentors. And I would just say right back to her that she has held the door open for so many people and let us work with her, and has been just a source of strength and true leadership in a very difficult time. I can't imagine having anyone else in the role she's in right now. And I'm really grateful for her leadership there. She knows that the next thing that's going to come out of my mouth is that the way that we make sure that people have enough housing in New Jersey is to build homes that people can afford. And we do that by preserving and protecting the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We fought for a decade to get it refunded. Governor Murphy, to his credit, fully funded it this year in this budget. And a number of the legislators on this call championing that as well. And then we had a pandemic that has really harmed our ability to access those resources. So we strongly support the governor's budget plan in his bonding request, and the Assembly has moved that legislation. We need action in the Senate on that. So Senator Greenstein, you can expect to hear from us. We need the Senate to move on that legislation ASAP so that we can make sure that the funding that's in the budget to create affordable homes for folks all across our state is preserved by that bonding process. And we also need to make sure that we help renters and take huge steps to prevent what we know is going to be an enormous eviction and foreclosure tsunami. We saw the disproportionate impact of foreclosures and eviction and subsequent evictions on folks after the Great Recession. It absolutely wiped out generational wealth for Black and Latino families. We did a study, and I was feverishly trying to find it and couldn't, but I will certainly share it with Sarah and Loretta later, and you can post it as part of the chat. There was a study done with us at Rutgers by Kathy Newman that really detailed the impact of the foreclosure crisis after the Great Recession and found the disproportionate and stark disproportionate impact on the loss of people's homes as a result of the Great Recession. Huge impact on Black and Latino families, much more so than white families, and that's pretty standard here in New Jersey. The rates for home ownership in New Jersey are disproportionately and overwhelmingly white families own their homes, Black and Latino families rent. That is just, that's the statistics. And, we can do more to encourage home ownership and to make sure that people are building generational wealth. And we need to make sure that people at this very critical time in our state do not become homeless, because if you cannot pay the rent and the eviction moratorium is lifted, which it will be 60 days after the governor lifts the public health emergency, we will absolutely have people living in the streets, and we will have overcrowded shelters. And that's why we have been working with Assemblywoman Sumter, who's a major sponsor, as well as Assemblywoman Timberlake, Senator Singleton, and others to pass the People's Bill, A4226. It is a critical piece of legislation. I would ask every legislator on this call to become a sponsor if they aren't already, and to ask all of you to reach out to your elected officials and ask them to sponsor this bill. We absolutely must have eviction protections for our lowest income tenants and our homeowners. We know that people do not have a safe place to live, that they cannot shelter in place, and that if we have people who are evicted on the street, they will make decisions that will impact other people's health by having to double up or potentially living in shelters. So we absolutely have to have this bill. It is July 8th. The rent has been due for 3 months under this pandemic. There has been only the smallest amount of rental assistance from the federal government. If the U.S. Senate would pass the HEROES Act, we would have $3 billion in federal funding for rental assistance. But we can't wait for them to act. We need the legislature and the governor here in New Jersey to give people time to repay their rent. And that's what the People's Bill would do. It would really allow people to negotiate with their landlord, to have more time to pay their rent, and to negotiate with their bank to have more time to pay their mortgage, so that people can get the one thing that money can't buy, which is time. So we are really asking for everyone's help in making sure that that legislation moves forward. It is absolutely critical that we protect people's right to stay in their home. And generational wealth is primarily created for most families, working class families, through home ownership. And if you look at the stats from the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and I keep bringing them up because they've done such incredibly important work on this, the median net wealth of white families is $325,000, and the median net wealth of Black families is $6,100. That's it. I'm going to say that again: $325,000 for white families and $6,100 for Black families. That is a distressing, horrible statistic. And unless we take really targeted action to make sure that people do not lose their home, which is their biggest form of generational wealth, we will have had a wonderful conversation today, but we won't actually have helped people make sure that they don't slide backwards, and that disparity does not become greater. So we really do need that foreclosure protection. We need that eviction protection, and we need to make sure that people have a safe, affordable place to call home. John mentioned it when he was talking about coming out of prison, that he had nowhere to live. And that is a very, very, very common experience for ex-offenders. It is very hard to find a place to live, whether you are working or not working. We know too many families living in their cars. This is simply a moral issue. We absolutely have the information and the know-how and the technology to solve homelessness and our housing crisis. We are not putting people on the moon. This is not rocket science. It simply requires the political will, advocacy, and organizing and commitment to get it done. So we, as the Housing and Community Development Network of the Statewide Association of Nonprofit Community Organizations, many of which were born out of the rebellions in the 60s and early 70s, this is our mission. And we believe that it's very important to have these conversations early on in the response to the horrific killing of George Floyd. We spent some time with our members talking about why it's important and essential and our obligation to say Black Lives Matter, that community development organizations have a responsibility to talk about police brutality and to not just say, well, we should build more housing and that's going to solve everything, because it won't. But it will help address the systemic inequities that people in communities around our state and country are experiencing and have been experiencing for far too long. So we're here to both help inform and also to listen to see how we can be better allies and partners in this fight. So I thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Stacey, again, thank you very much for a thorough presentation as always. And I just want to reemphasize what you emphasized as well. This $3 billion of borrowing is so important, so critical. We need a bridge. There has to be a bridge to carry us over from the loss of revenues to when the economy gets back and we can pay it back. We just can't cut these vital programs that would do long-term damage to our economy and the health and welfare of our folks without it. So I just want to emphasize the importance of that as well. And now, Dr. Farrell, to moderate the discussion from everybody on board. Dr. Farrell.
Thank you so much, Senator Lesniak, and to all of our speakers. Before we open up this discussion, I'd like to introduce our panelists who've spent their lives as social justice warriors. They bring to the table a wealth of information on these topics, and we are so grateful for their participation this afternoon. First, we have the 52nd governor of the state of New Jersey, Jim McGreevey, a longtime advocate for prison reform. We have with us Senator Linda Greenstein, a Democratic member of the New Jersey State Senate for the 14th Legislative District. Assemblyman Herb Conaway, who was recently elected to a 10th term representing the 7th Legislative District in New Jersey's General Assembly. We have Reverend Leonard Grayson, who is both the president of the Elizabeth chapter of the NAACP and part of the Healing Communities Prison Reentry Ministry. We have with us Tyrone Barnes, a formerly incarcerated individual who is a staunch advocate for criminal justice reform. Renee Kubiatis, who serves as the executive director of the Anti-Poverty Network of New Jersey. Alexander Shalom, the senior supervising attorney and director of Supreme Court advocacy at the ACLU New Jersey. Former parole officer for the city of Newark and founder of Integrity House, David Kerr. Aaron Green, who's an associate counsel at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. Morgan Johnson, a 21-year-old who organized a Black Lives Matter protest from Scotch Plains to Westfield that brought together more than 1,000 community members. And Councilwoman Patricia Perkins Augusti, who is the only female member of the 9-member legislative governing body in Elizabeth. So now I would like to move on to begin our conversation by asking some questions. Senator Greenstein, I'd like to start with you. Since recent events have really highlighted injustices within policing systems, the New Jersey legislature has jumped into action to respond to protesters' cries for reform. As the chair of the Senate Law and Public Safety Committee, how can you ensure that legislation is enacted which attacks the roots of these issues and eliminates systemic racism? And what can members of our audience do to possibly help you achieve these solutions and move these conversations forward?
Thank you. Several weeks ago, I asked the Senate president if he would support the idea of my having hearings on police reform.
Senator Greenstein, I think you're breaking up.
Oh, that could be I don't know. I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
That seems to be better, yes.
Okay. It goes in and out, unfortunately, sometimes. I don't know what it is. But At any rate, we've been planning the hearing for a couple of weeks, and we have the first one coming up on July 15th. And I've tried to take the approach that I want to hear any and all sides of the issue. I want to try to get people in there who will talk about all extremes of the issue and everything in between. But we also want to take an approach where we get people to listen and to talk to each other. And so far, I've spent many, many hours on the telephone, Zoom calls, with people who will be speaking. And I'll give you an idea of a couple of the people. And I find everybody on all sides of the issue actually to be quite reasonable. They're all backing up their viewpoints and seem very willing to work issues. So just to give you an idea of some of the people who will be present at the first hearing, and we have many more for the next few hearings. We wanted to talk to the police union. So that would be the PBA, the FOP, and the state troopers. The state troopers actually, after the consent decree years ago because of racial profiling, really had to do things the hard way, which means they had to really change their processes and their rules. And they've actually done a pretty decent job of it. They've done quite a few reforms already, and they're open to other reforms too. They said they were not open to it originally. They were pretty upset years ago, but now they're used to all the reforms, and they actually have done quite a bit there. So we'll be hearing about that. We're also going to be a couple of former attorneys general, Peter Harvey, who runs the police oversight. Now, I'm not sure, am I still on? Because this thing is cycling in and out, so I'm not sure.
You are.
Hopefully you can see me. Peter Harvey, who runs the police oversight in Newark, along with Mayor Baraka from Newark, who will also be testifying. And Peter Harvey, a former attorney general, and also, as I say, he's involved in police oversight up there. He has a lot of good information issues. We also hope to hear from the NAACP. We're still working on getting that firmed up. I don't know if Reverend Boyer is on this call, but
he is not.
He is not.
He's not able to make it.
Oh, okay. Well, he's one of the people who'll be speaking. Giles Shipp from the Black Police Officers Association called Noble. And Scott Thompson, who was a former chief down in Camden. We felt like Newark and Camden were two areas that we really want to highlight because of all the changes there and all the things accomplished. And they have some negatives too, so we want to hear all about that. A professor from Georgetown, Paul Butler. And starting in the second hearing, we're hoping to hear a lot more from professors because a lot of them are working on innovative policing techniques. There are innovative policing organizations around the country, nonprofits that are doing work on these issues. So we're trying to get a number of people from there. We have a Rutgers Policing Institute. They'll speak in the future. Reva Foster from the Black Issues Convention. And of course, we couldn't do it without two of our senators, Ron Rice and Nellie Poe. One is the head of the Black Legislators Caucus. The other is the head of the Latino Legislators Caucus. So what we're trying to drill down as to what we want everybody to cover. There's a combination of them covering issues, and I'll tell you about a few of the issues, and also covering essentially what their experience has been, personal experiences, what they think the problems are with police or not, or with other issues in society that touch on it. As you mentioned, whether it's housing or healthcare, all of those issues are very important and are real problems in the indirectly address those, though our focus is really going to be on the police. So just some of the issues that we've identified. One is training, and we're also going to look at professional licensing, how we could redo that process, take some of the good things from process now and move it into, let's say, a more professionalized police force, people with more education. This again would be forward-looking. We're not going to retroactively make people, do some of these things, but certainly looking forward, we want to make sure our police force is as professionalized as it can be. We're also going to look at minority recruitment, very important. We're going to look at how bias is detected. That should be part of the licensing process. What's going to be done to make sure that we weed out people who may have psychological problems and other kinds of problems, and may have essentially maybe openly racist. I think they do weed them out, but I think we want to make sure that that happens as a result of the licensing process. And we'll be discussing civilian review boards and how that might be done. Body cameras, definitely. Community policing, and the changing role of the police to include social service, social work. I mean, there's a movement called defund the police, and I don't think many of us are actually in favor of that. I think we're a little more moderate on that issue, although I've heard that that's what they're doing in Minneapolis. I think what we're looking for is, what do we need to do to change the police forces? Whether we want to add, for example, should social service people be going along with police officers on certain calls? Because I don't think any of us would really want social service people to go out alone on a call that could be dangerous. But the issue is less on the issue of money and defunding, and the issue of changing the function and what do we need to do there. So those are one of the many issues that we're going to be dealing with. And we, as I say, I think we're going to get a lot of good information probably in the second hearing. Academics who bring a tremendous background. They've done a lot of writing on these issues, and we want to look. I mean, we're lucky here in New Jersey. We haven't had a Ferguson. We haven't had most of these kinds of killings, murders. But nevertheless, there have been some problems. There have been the consent decrees, as I mentioned, and we want to explore all that and decide what our problems actually are here in this state and what we can do to improve them. So it should be a very interesting.
Great, thank you. And if you've got some information that you could share with Sarah and me that we could then push out to today's participants in a follow-up email, we'd be very happy to do that.
Oh, sure, I can do that.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, so yesterday was primary day, and it seems as if it would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about voting. As we talk about taking action to combat systemic racism, it seems that the easiest and perhaps most impactful way for us to do that is for each of us to vote. Mr. Green, could you talk about what impact voting, especially in local elections, can have on affecting change and how we can get people out to vote?
Yes, thank you, Professor Farrell, and thank you to this esteemed panel. It's an honor to join you today. Looking on the past few weeks around our country and seeing, I think, close to 26 million people in the streets, I've been fortunate to join some of the demonstrations, and it's been a historic moment. And we've seen some righteous reforms at a local level in a matter of weeks, the impact that people have been able to have in the community. So the New Jersey, can you hear me? Okay, perfect, okay. At the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, we have come up with a few documents that push people in the direction of equipping their vote. Voting is important, but it's also important to have accountability throughout that term, raising issues that impact your community, making sure that concerns are heard by those who are in office. So one of our documents focuses on voting and policing, really showing the positions of people in office and how that relates to policing and how they control policing. Like, for example, many mayors introduce the budget to the city council that includes the police budget for the year. And that's something that people can be involved in making sure that that is what they want for the community. Is there being enough money invested into community resources, like schools, libraries, community centers, things that really impact some issues like poverty. And as we move forward too, we have another document that says, after you say Black Lives Matter, there are 10 things that you can do. I'm not going to go through the 10 things, I know we have a time commitment, but a few things I want to highlight are reparations. So we talk about how New Jersey has one of the highest disparities when it comes to wealth. The white median wealth is $352,000. The Black median wealth is $6,100. Reparations. We work together with getting a bill presented that will create a reparations task force. And why reparations? When we look at the 400 years from the original kidnapping and how it still has a significant role in the wide wealth disparity that we see in this country, it's important that we have reparation programs that repair communities, specifically Black communities, to where they need to be in society. Also guaranteed basic income. When we look at Newark, there's a recent report that was released. This is something that municipalities could be considering and moving forward with, and it's important that voters advocate for that. Like I said, cast the ballot on the election day, but throughout that term, advocate for guaranteed income. This would provide income to people that are in need, so they can provide for their families and get the necessary things that they need in the community. Also, considering hosting voter candidate forums, we've come up with a toolkit that goes through the details of how to host a candidate forum, where you can do it throughout the election season, but also do it throughout the term, where you can host it via Zoom because of the social distancing measures that are in place because of COVID-19, where community members can be asking questions. Many of the issues can be raised that need to be addressed in the community. Also, more importantly, when it comes to policing, we are pushing for the demilitarization of policing. The 1033 program that was passed in the 90s lets the transfer of military equipment to police forces across this country. We also see how $100 billion is dispersed to police departments across the country, and city councils, mayors determine how that disbursement will look like in their community. So it's important that people are engaged in these various issues to make change. We look in New Jersey, we see how we have the highest disparity rate when it comes to youth incarceration. A Black child is 21 times more likely than a white child to be incarcerated. So therefore, we've championed the Youth Justice Transformation Act, which would close all youth prisons and invest nearly $100 million in those communities. We spend over $300,000 to incarcerate each child. What if we invested that money into the community instead of investing in incarcerating our youth? We also have one of the highest disparities when it comes to incarceration in the youth and the adult facilities. A Black person is 12 times more likely than a white person to be incarcerated in New Jersey. And 62% of the prison population in New Jersey is Black, even though the Black population is only 15% overall. So to end, I just want to reiterate that, like I said, it's important to show up on election day. It's important to be engaged in those efforts, but it's also more important to be engaged throughout that term. Once you cast your ballot, to hold the elected officials accountable, to meet with them, to send letters, to engage, to make sure that the issues that are impacting your community are addressed. We saw it great with our 1840 More campaign that was mentioned by Assemblywoman Sumter, where it restored the right to 83,000 people on probation parole. We thank her so much for her work on that and many of our partners. That's another example of how we engage in campaigns on important issues in our communities. Voters, community members coming together and pushing forth important changes so that people can be involved in democracy, people can have access to the resources that they need. We address economics, we address the system of mass incarceration. We also address the system of policing, right? Banning chokeholds, demilitarizing the police, and also communities having a say of what does public safety look like in my community, transforming what public safety looks like. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And I look forward to the rest of the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And we have already talked about partnering on bringing some of these conversations to the Human Rights Institute at Kean in the fall. So I look forward to continuing that conversation. Okay, next up, Ms. Johnson, you are probably the youngest panelist we have with us today. So this question is for you. Popular opinion seems to be that young people are disengaged and uninterested in the voting process. You, however, put together an event that drew over 1,000 people to protest police brutality in the wake of George Floyd's death. I'm thinking then that perhaps whatever it is we're doing just isn't reaching your generation. What can we do to better involve and engage you and your peers?
Well, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. I would like to start off with that. But to also start, I want to say it's never too young. No one's ever too young to get educated or get informed with what's going on. And I think some people forget that, because after my protest, I talked to a 5th grade class. Some people might think 5th grade's too young, but they know what's going on. They have questions. They want to know what they can do or how they can learn more. So I want to really emphasize that, one, it's not too young to like educate kids. And also I would say have a representation, because kids my age and younger, social media is our life at this point. Like, we communicate through social media, we communicate through text messaging, calls. And that's honestly, I feel like, why I had a big outcome for my protest, because we just put our flyer on Instagram and it circulated through Facebook and everything. So I feel like older like parents and stuff have to realize that we think of things a different way. We think, okay, let me just text my friend, protest is happening here. So to have that representation and connect with us through what we're used to, I think that's definitely one way you guys can reach out to the younger generation. And also in terms of voting, I feel like younger kids my age are always looking for ways to get involved and ways to help, but sometimes not in arm's reach. For instance, I voted yesterday, but I had to do the work myself. I had to individually look up each candidate and see who's doing what, to make sure I'm voting right. But if there was something on social media that individually explained each candidate, I feel like that would be easier, because some people don't vote because they don't know who's running, they don't know information. So I feel like if that information was in arm's length of the kids, I feel like they would be more engaged and more willing to help, because everyone is helping, everyone wants to help, and they just don't know how. Because I had people coming to me after my protest asking, Morgan, what can I do? How can I do a protest myself? So it's not that they're disengaged and they don't want to learn. It's just that you have to find that meeting point so everyone can have that communication. Everyone can say, this is what you might want to do. So I feel like finding that medium is the best way to engage the younger generation. And then you guys will be able to move forward in terms of how to reach out to more people. And sorry, I wrote some stuff down, guys. And that's pretty much, I want to say social media is the biggest platform right now, because when I was this age, I really didn't know what was going on. And now that I have the platform to inform kids and to reach out to kids, I feel like that's the big part, because when we did our protest, we weren't looking for a big outcome. We just wanted to inform one person, because if you get to one person, that person can get to somebody else. And it's just about the networking and the communication from that point on. So I feel like social media is something you guys should all think about, because that can draw a lot of attention.
Thanks so much, Morgan. It makes me think that maybe we can be working with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice to translate some of their candidates forums into Instagram posts. So I think you've given us some really good stuff to think about, and some direction ahead in terms of how we're going to facilitate programming in what is sort of an incredibly uncertain fall. So thank you. Okay, this question is for I think several of our panelists, and it's about the Earn Your Way Out program. We've heard a lot of discussion about this afternoon, and how it will help incarcerated people re-enter society and reduce recidivism. But it seems like it's a little bit stalled. So what can we do to work with the Department of Corrections to ensure that this program gets implemented? And Governor McGreevey, I was hoping you would start with this question.
So I think Senator Lesniak has met with the commissioner, and he's working to move for the Earn Your Way Out. I think there are a number of, if you will, and John has also spoken to this. I think there are a number of efforts that have to be taken place so that we can design a ramp so that people can move quickly through the Earn Your Way Out mechanism. The Earn Your Way Out has a number of specific benchmarks that must be accomplished on a wide variety of areas. And so one of the things that I would do, but obviously it's the discretion of the commissioner, is that I would be looking at creating opportunities to design a protocol that looks at questions on employment, on health insurance, on addiction treatment, on mental illness. The governor just recently signed legislation that will require NJDOC to move forward on Medicaid applications and SNAP food stamp, as well as GA. That's going to be significantly helpful. But within the Earn Your Way Out legislation, there are specific benchmarks that have to be addressed. And so I think it's a broader design of the plan that Senator Lesniak has alluded to, but then it's starting literally now to identify those individuals who will be capable of meeting those requirements.
Governor, you muted yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. People were in the office. So no, so I think that's it. It's designing the broad template of the program. And then I think we have to begin the process of determining who is eligible for Earn Your Way Out. So that's a specific process that has to be done by NJDOC, and that needs to be undertaken within the next 90 days.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
So it's just designing the broad scope of the program. And I think that has to be done, and has to be clearly done with accountable objectives and benchmarks. And then we have to discern who is eligible. And so I think that every time NJDOC acts, part of the, sort of the natural rhythm of the department, whether it's in a county jail or state prison, they're focused on the day-to-day operations. I think Earn Your Way Out provides a very unique opportunity. But what if respectfully, I would recommend to the commissioner that we begin to determine who has eligibility by looking at the length of sentence, the determination of parole eligibility, the determination whether it's a No Early Release Act offense, the number of criteria that are set forth in the statute, so that we know we have a general idea. And I think Senator Lesniak and Senator Cunningham projected the population potentially in the legislation, but I think you have to get down and specifically identify who is eligible and then begin to track them into a larger programmatic platform for the Earn Your Way Out legislation.
Terrific.
Alex?
Yeah, Mr. Shalom, I think that you have some thoughts on this.
I mean, I just have some broader thoughts, and I feel like it's kind of my role as the ACLU representative to be the bringer of gloom and doom, and to say that while Earn Your Way Out is significant and is among the most important criminal justice reforms that we've seen in this country in a long time, it is also not nearly enough. And so we need to be pushing for the full implementation of Earn Your Way Out. But insofar as Earn Your Way Out is limited to people who are in on nonviolent offenses, and 2/3 of people in our prisons are in on violent offenses, we need to be taking action to stop making those artificial distinctions between people whose crimes of conviction are for near offenses and those who are not, which we know amplify racial disparities. And so there are things out there that many of the wonderful people who have spoken already today have been involved with. But for example, the Sentencing Commission has put forth a series of recommendations that have the support of both the public defender and the attorney general. So these should be easy reforms to pass that would do things like end mandatory minimums for drug offenses, for property crimes, reduce mandatory minimums for certain violent offenses. Those are critical reforms that need to be passed today. We also, New Jersey is currently dealing with the worst prison death rate as a result of COVID-19 in the country, the very worst. So when we're talking about making John Kufos look bad amongst his the Texans and the Alabamians and the Georgians, New Jersey is 50 of 50 in prison death rate. And there's something we can do about that. There's Senate Bill 2519, Assembly Bill 4235, which would provide public health emergency credits to accelerate people who are going to be getting out anyway, even before Earn Your Way Out. People who are maxing out in the next 12 months would get out under this bill, releasing up to 3,000 or even 4,000 people and making the prisons less crowded for the 15,000 who are stuck in there. So all I'm trying to say is we've done great things in New Jersey. Senator Lesniak has been at the forefront of so many of them. But there's so much more to do. Did you want to say something, Governor McGreevey?
Yeah, if I can, Alex. I mean, I think what Alex and what Senator Lesniak, what Ray did, which was what was possible at the time. But I think what we understand is that we've created this false dichotomy, unfortunately, between violent crime and nonviolent crime. And when we look to the numbers of those incarcerated, say, for example, as of May 1st, we have 3,400 persons over the age of 55 incarcerated. One of the concerns that we have, to go to Alex's point, is that the Criminal Justice Disposition Commission made a bold step in reducing the burden, if you will, the punitive aspect of the sentence of No Early Release Act. But particularly in terms of murder, felony murder, we have so much further to go. And one of the real challenges, I think, for many of us is that when we look at those that have served the punitive aspect of their sentence, namely 30 years, but they still languish in prison. And so when, we look at those statistics, Alex, we have, 886 persons between the ages of 55 and 60. And I can just go right down the line, upwards of 2,000 individuals. And so what I would argue is, particularly for felony murder, there's a 1% chance for recidivism. For those over the age of 60, there's a 1% chance of recidivism. So the real driving concern is particularly for those that, we're making some moves in the right direction. I think Senator Lesniak was in the vanguard on so many of these issues. And I think it's great that Chief Justice Poritz and the commission have moved to reduce NERA. But I would just also ask us to be mindful of all those individuals who were sentenced under NERA and serving these god-awful sentences, and frankly, who will die in prison unless we create alternative mechanisms to release them. And that's why what Alex said is so critically important. And the Assemblywoman, the Senator Lesniak, because it's not only that we project a more rational criminal justice system forward, but we begin to at least attempt to mitigate, if not address what many of us would perceive to be the outrageously punitive sentences that will cause thousands to die in New Jersey state prisons for murders that were committed, in some cases, 3 or 4 decades ago.
I had planned to make all sorts of snide jokes at your expense, Governor McGreevey, but now that you've agreed with me, I feel like I have to come up with something else to talk about. So I want to just finish the point on there being so much more we can do. We talk about voting rights, and people talked, I think Assemblywoman Sumter talked about how exciting it is that 83,000 people were eligible to vote for the first time in a century and a half yesterday. but we also have to point out that there's still 18,000 people who are disfranchised because of a racist rule that strips the right to vote for people who are convicted of crimes and serving a sentence in prison. That's got to be the next step if we want to pretend we live in a participatory democracy where every person is entitled to one vote. And the last point I want to say is, we're talking a lot about policing, and I agree that the unions have to be at the table if we're going to talk about real reform, but we also have to be willing to call them out when they stand as barriers to reasonable reform. So when the Attorney General announces that he is going to make public discipline that has been imposed, serious discipline that has been imposed on police officers, which incidentally is the same rule we have for plumbers and manicurists and lawyers and judges and every other regulated profession in New Jersey. And 5 police officer unions sue to enjoin that, to say, no, we shouldn't get to learn about the discipline that's been imposed on police officers. We as a community, and this kind of ties in the last question and Ms. Johnson's point about and Aaron's point about this isn't about just what we do in the voting booth. We need to bring our community voice to say that's unacceptable. And if you want to police us, then we have to have a voice in how that's done. And part of that is the modicum of transparency that the Attorney General has put forth in his directive. And in fact, we need to go further to make sure that police discipline is a matter of public record.
Thanks, Alex. Mr. Barnes, I know that this is a particularly personal issue for you. Would you like to jump in on this?
Well, Ray, you have something to say? I see Ray in the background. Oh, you got up? Okay.
I thought we'd start with you and then we could circle back to the senator.
I just wanted to, just to echo what Alex was saying. He hit it dead on the point. When we talk in terms, I just wanted to add, when we talk in terms of earning your way out, this bill was passed in January of 2020. It's 7 months in, and DOC haven't done anything to move forward with this. I understand the governor, talking about the benchmark that DOC have, but in order for this thing to move forward, this bill is very a critical bill. In order for this bill to move forward, I think the first step we should do is ask the senators to utilize their judicial power at bringing the New Jersey commissioner and of DOC, the Department of Corrections, and the parole board, and question them about the steps, if any, have taken. It's my understanding from having extensive contact within the prison judicial system, prison industrial complex rather, that nothing is being done regarding this bill. It's a bill that was signed with good intent. That was put forward by the legislators with good intent and signed on the day of Martin Luther King Day by the governor with good intent. However, DOC hasn't done anything to get this bill moving. And this is a critical piece at a critical time. This bill is important. Why? For many reasons, but one of the main reasons is, to go to Alex's point, is that we have scores and scores of prisoners in New Jersey, prisoners, individuals, residents, New Jersey residents, that's forced to be housed in these barbaric conditions in New Jersey prisons, and forced to double lock, forced to lock into a cell, a small cell, probably half size of your bathroom, into a cell with another individual human being. When they put in a request slip for medical problems that they have, they be seen 2 or 3 weeks later, by medical staff who give them Tylenol and then send them back to the cell. If we gonna talk clear about reforming prison systems and reforming the police, then we have to have individuals like myself, and I appreciate y'all to invite me here, who have conversations that's not watered down, and conversations that's clear cut and addressing the issues that affect our people. And when you talk in terms of police reform, I commend the Senator Greenstein. Sarah, what was her name? Greenstein. The senator was talking about that New Jersey is not a Ferguson. New Jersey is worse than a Ferguson. We have a cop that jumped out of a car right here in North New Jersey and was shooting at a moving car, and murdered the guy point blank range. That cop has been brought up on charges, but we have scores of others, whether it's state troopers or whether it's cops who murder us as Black men, and with impunity and don't get sanctioned. So, you know, in order for us to get, and the senator need the names of the individuals that was murdered by these police officers or these state troops, I will be gladly to provide her with the names. But what we need to do is, and I encourage the senators, you know, in order to, when we talk in terms of get back on topic or earn your way out, I think the senator and the legislators need to utilize their judicial power, legislative subpoena power, and call the commissioner, the DOC commissioner of New Jersey, along with the DOC, the commissioner of the parole board, and question them about the delay in moving this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Lesniak, did you have something you wanted to add? I'm sure you've got stuff. Are you there?
Absolutely. I've been chomping at the bit. First of all, I totally agree. We need strong legislative oversight. We need to bring the commissioner in to answer questions about getting Earn Your Way Out moving. But also there's a misconception. Earn Your Way Out does not just apply to nonviolent criminals. It only does not apply to no early release sentences. So we're talking about the overwhelming majority of offenders who can take advantage of Earn Your Way Out. But with regard to no early release, that's a sentencing issue that you will also identify that has to be addressed. But I just want to make this clear. I know some political folks like to say, well, it only applies to nonviolent. No, it applies to everyone incarcerated other than those in a no early release situation. I would have loved to have included that, but I was told that I probably couldn't get the bill through with that involved. So we can do both. So I just want to clarify that. I want to thank everybody for your great comments today. They've all been wonderful and enlightening.
I was just saying, Senator Lesniak, that's why.
Alex, you're muted.
Alex.
How about now?
You're good now.
And that's the difference between Senator Lesniak and me. That's why he was a senator for 8,000 years and I've been for 0, because he gets through the political realities, and I have always appreciated about him the ability to get done what can get done and also push for more. And that's otherwise I wouldn't come into his home turf here and say we need to do more. But I know he always wants to do more, but he also wants to take the win where he can get it. And I don't want to depreciate at all Earn Your Way Out as a critical win. It is one that deserves to be lauded and celebrated, and then we move on to do more, because we're working to dismantle centuries of racism, and that's not going to get done with a single bill. So bravo.
Bravo.
John, did you have something to add?
Yes, thanks. And you know, Alex hit the nail on the head with respect to mandatory minimums. You know, piece of trivia, I don't even think the state of Texas has mandatory minimums and Texas will never be accused of being a soft on crime state, of course. And I think you have these two poles, right? On one end, you have no mandatory minimums in a place like a Texas. And then when you look at places like Florida and the federal system, everything is 85%. Everything is a no early release act when you're incarcerated there. But even in the federal system, when you go back to the First Step Act, people are now eligible for home confinement when they've served less than that 85% of their sentence. So if this motivates anybody, I mean, President Trump signed a law to constructively reduce the 85% in the federal system with the great advocates and the legislators and the governor here in New Jersey. There should be no reason why mandatory minimums for many offenses aren't next, because it just doesn't make sense. And it also doesn't offer any incentive for anybody to do anything, because if you know that you're sitting for 85% of whatever number you're given, you have no incentive to participate in programming. You have no incentive to do anything, actually, because no matter how good or bad you are, you're going to be there for the same time, right? With the exception of for the longest sentences. So I do think mandatory minimum reform is next, or I hope it's next. But just as Earn Your Way Out was able to build in a significant reentry infrastructure that New Jersey has, and some of the other laws the FRRA in New Jersey has, mandatory minimum reform is ripe to be built upon Earn Your Way Out and the other laws that came before it.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, what you said makes so much sense, but I mean, one of the things that I think concerns some of us, and Alex can speak to this more eloquently than I, is that on the Criminal Justice Disposition Commission, when it came time to NERA and bringing it down even further, there was pushback, and particularly on, you know, felony murder, looking for example, the whole notion of rehabilitative parole and providing an opportunity for people to be released through the public defender's office. I think there's, to what Senator Lesniak said, to what Alex said, to what Assemblywoman Sumter said, there's still this artificial divide between violent and nonviolent crimes that has impacted our approach to NERA and to so much. I mean, as Senator Lesniak said, Ray got as far, he got as much as he could when he did it, but we still have so much, and I think you've sort of brought a light to the fact of what's not happening in other states that ironically remains in New Jersey with this false distinction as to violent crimes, albeit some of those crimes have the lowest recidivism numbers in the nation. Could you just respond as to where your sense is, where New Jersey is on this whole question of NERA?
Governor McGreevey, I'm sorry, I need to jump in here. We are getting kind of tight on time. If we could move on to another question, and then if we have more time, circle back on this. I know we could have spent the entire 2 hours talking just about Earn Your Way Out.
Thank you, Loretta.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. So what I'd like to talk about, and many of you brought this up in your remarks about Earn Your Way Out. Black and brown people have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. In addition to being a serious public health issue, the pandemic has exposed serious cracks in our society's foundation. Millions have lost their jobs and are in danger of losing their homes. Children who rely on school lunch programs go hungry and don't have access to the technology that they need to continue their studies from home. Social and support services that are often offered through schools are no longer available to the people who need it most. What can we as a community do to help close these gaps, and particularly as we face an uncertain fall? And I'd like to start with Councilwoman Perkins Auguste. Councilwoman? Councilwoman Auguste, are you there? Could you unmute yourself?
Maybe a moderator could unmute her.
She has to unmute herself, unfortunately.
At the bottom left of your screen, you'll see a microphone with a red line through it. Just click it.
Ms. Kubiatis, while we're waiting for to work out these technical problems, could you comment on this?
Sure. Well, one, thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of these wonderful people who are also great leaders across our state in this discussion today. I think Assemblywoman Sumter said this earlier, we need, not to go back to where we were, but we need a different road forward. And we need one that really recognizes the dignity and worth of every person. We need policies that recognize the dignity and worth of every person. And I think, Stacy said this, and a number of folks around the criminal justice conversation just now. There are some great things happening, but so much more needs to be done, right? We need to eliminate the ban on people coming out of prison with a drug distribution conviction who are prohibited from gaining access to general assistance and housing assistance. We have we have our food banks, our pantries who've been really stepping up in this moment and using their own funds to really make sure that people are fed. But we know that they are really just a drop in the bucket in terms of accessing food assistance in this country. And for example, the pandemic food assistance for children who weren't in school a few months ago that was passed through the CARES Act just got released today for people who are on food assistance and get SNAP assistance currently, and those who whose children were eligible for reduced and free lunches at school will be getting those hopefully by Monday on new cards if they weren't already enrolled in SNAP assistance. And those programs really are you know, the bulk of what helps address food insecurity in this country. And so we certainly need a lot more assistance, including housing from the HEROES Act, you know, food assistance money that's in the HEROES Act. So we definitely need a lot more assistance coming into our state to help us. And certainly I'll echo what Stacy said earlier, the bonding act to help our communities really and our state really kind of address the gap right now. Oh, I think
Yes.
Councilwoman's back.
Thank you so much. Yes, this new system. I've listened to everybody and I'm saying, before we really start to try to enact or do all these programs, which are wonderful and can aid and assist, we really need to understand the state of New Jersey. If this is a conversation to really combat systematic social inequities, we have to understand the state of New Jersey. The state of New Jersey was one of the last states in the Union to abolish slavery. Slavery and our neighboring city, our neighboring state like New York was abolished in 1804. Legal slavery in the state of New Jersey was abolished in 1865. So you're looking at about 201 years from when New Jersey was formed in terms of when it abolished slavery. In terms of all these inequities that are systemic in our system is due to racism and for the greed of capitalism. And so New Jersey have a lot of issues. There's a lot of cracks in the system, some crevices in the system. And until we understand our state, the historical content on which New Jersey was born out of, we will never really begin to provide some equities in housing. Housing is the chief thing. We can't build a new earth. This is it. This is the land that we're on. So housing, owning a home is so valuable to generational wealth. But in New Jersey, you found deeds that said, do not sell to Negro, do not sell to African American, do not, at that term it was Negro, do not sell your home to a Negro. That is a systemic racial root that we must really begin to deal with. And so until New Jerseyans, us who are about the solution, get on the same page in terms of where we are going to start, we will work at these issues, but we will really not come to a more better union for our residents here in the state of New Jersey. It takes an act of Congress, it takes the state legislator and local laws to really combat what our social service organizations are trying to do. Senator Raymond Lesniak and others, I give them, they are our champion. They've been on this fight for a long time and they are right on the money. But we have to understand who New Jersey is and what New Jersey is as a state. And once we realize what and who New Jersey is, then we can really begin to deal with this systemic problems of racial injustice, economic injustice, and really deal with the human side of living in a harmonious state. We have to deal with these issues. To Senator Linda Greenstein, she must realize that we have some problems in New Jersey. On May 23rd, 2020, there was a young man shot and killed on the New Jersey Parkway. I don't know why she doesn't know about that case. Mr. Maurice Gordon was shot by a state trooper. He was unarmed, meaning no guns, no weapons. So to say we're not a Ferguson, no, we're not a Ferguson. We are a New Jerseyan, and we got a lot of racial issues here in the state of New Jersey. We are an extremely segregated state, extremely segregated. The income disparities is appalling in 2020. You know, New Jersey, what we need to enact immediately is state reparations. They need to be saying, I'm sorry to African Americans for keeping you in chattel slavery up until 1865. That is what the state of New Jersey can take the lead on. So there are some really critical issues. As an African American descendant, my people were stolen out of Africa and brought here in 1619. The state of New Jersey was formed in 1664. 45 years different between 1619, when the first African was stolen from Africa, brought to Virginia, and then here we have New Jersey being formed as a state in 1664. And then in 1865, New Jersey finally decided to end slavery legally. Meanwhile, the state of New York and other northern states have already abolished slavery, almost 50 years before New Jersey. We are a very segregated state. We are a very racist state. The income inequalities is awful. And to tap it off, the housing situation. We all know that housing, real estate is wealth, is generational wealth for your family. It is very difficult. And New Jersey is so expensive to live in as a state. And I'm talking about, not even talking about African Americans who are incarcerated. I'm talking about us who never been incarcerated. That's just a small number of the African Americans throughout the state of New Jersey. There are many of us who are just disenfranchised economically. Housing is so important. Food, clothing, and shelter is just the basic hierarchy of a human need. And housing in New Jersey is so high, the rents are high to buy homes. Yes, after the Great Depression in 1933, President Dwight Eisenhower developed a whole housing scheme for the country, so that when people came back from the war, World War II, they had an ability to buy homes and build wealth. But meanwhile, African Americans was not afforded those opportunities. They literally put in the deed, in the bill, do not sell to African Americans. Right. So we had to run to the cities where there was a lot of manufacturing going on because of World War II. So we gotta know this history in order to correct all these discrepancies and inadequacies that we have. And I'm listening to everybody. I was on for the whole 2 hours, and I listened, and I'm saying all that is great. Everything what everyone's saying is great, but we need to enact some stuff. The senators that were on, they have the ability. There's a case right before the state of New Jersey. Blueprint Capital is suing the state of New Jersey, the only African American investment firm located in Newark, New Jersey, is suing our state. And I say our state because my mom will be 83 years old and she was born and raised in the city of Elizabeth, our state. And so there's a lot of inequities. I listen to everybody. I pray. I don't want to be cut off because this is important. This is the 400th anniversary of African Americans being in this country. And it's time for this country to realize, in states like New Jersey, to realize we can move forward collectively in a harmonious way, but you have to make some really fundamental changes. You have to enact some stuff that is really going to raise the bar. Everyone is not incarcerated. All African Americans are not incarcerated. And I applaud that effort. And I work with that effort, but the housing situation in New Jersey is deplorable in terms of the taxes, the cost of housing. We have models in this country where we can see, and back in history where governors and presidents took the lead. Like President Eisenhower, he took the lead to build a whole, not make it affordable so people can buy them, live in them, pass them down to their relatives. So again, this is so awesome. I thank Kean University, the Lesniak Institute for Leadership, all the speakers. Everything that was said is correct, but New Jersey, we can do this together, but we have to understand, we have to look at the truth. And the truth will make us all better people. Yeah, we have some issues up in New Jersey. There's been, I don't know how the senator can say that when
Councilwoman, thank you so much. And I think you've given us so much to think about, not only today, but I think you've sort of put together what our programming needs to be for the rest of the year, at least. We do have a couple of panelists that we've not heard from yet, and I'd really like to try to give them an opportunity to speak. I'd like to start with Dr. Conaway.
I think I was next on this question, correct?
I don't know. Well, no,
yeah.
I'm going to get back to work. Let me just say this. And I was hoping we'd get to more healthcare. It has been mentioned how about the disparities in healthcare, and we need to focus on that. If you look at the differences between life expectancy across races, you can tie that difference right straight back to inequities, which lie across many spheres of a person's life, from how they're born, where they live, their job, right straight through their association with various aspects of the government. There are differences which have a determining effect on how long people live. In my view, and it's been mentioned, I think Dr. Robillard said before he left about system and systemic change, and the system that was created by government, by men and women will determine outcomes. They're very well designed to do that. And so systemic change is the key, and that's got to be driven by data. And I was asked to speak, I just mentioned a couple of things, and I'll just mention one that that I happen to be sponsoring. That is to begin to look at the data around access to laboratory studies on COVID, as an example. It's a small item, and there are a lot of bigger things, but I was asked to speak about one that was relevant to something recently that we've been working on in the legislature, and that is to begin to look at, as other states are requiring, and now the federal government, at least insofar as COVID's concerned, is to look at race and ethnicity data with respect to COVID. I think that needs to be expanded right across the communicable disease spectrum. We're also interested, and I'm actually curious to hear more from the LGBT community on it, and that we should also look at data with respect to gender and gender identity. Because we know there is evidence, certainly in the racial side is very strong, but there's also a lot of evidence in the LGBT community that there are disparities in outcomes. And if we can get this, and most of us at some point are going to have to go to a lab for something, and lab results often produce diagnoses, as in the case of COVID positivity, for example, or an HIV diagnosis, or a diagnosis of diabetes, so that you can begin to tie these attributes, these demographic attributes, to these things like race and ethnicity or gender identity, so that we can then apply policy solutions to them. So I'm a big believer in using data to drive policy, whether it be in policing. My office has looked at this, to get a data platform, a data set that can be used to ferret out, as Linda mentioned in the exploration of, I should say Senator Greenstein has mentioned in her explorations, on where bias is. Attorney General has put some things in place to try to identify this in the early aspects of a police officer's life. But we know that many people are not going to be screened out by that and will be acting in their role as a law enforcement officer. And so what happens there needs to be measured, and we need to be able to compare across various jurisdictions about what's happening there, and that so that we can make policy about how to stop things that are going to be that are not the outcomes that I think society generally wants. I hope that most people want to see fairness in how the government works. What they want to see fairness in outcomes. They want to see systems work fairly for everybody who's involved with them, and we can do that by moving down a data-driven path that identifies areas of disparity and begin to fix them piece by piece. As someone mentioned, we're not going to get them all at once, but progressive steps moving forward each time will bring change going forward. And we need to take advantage of the time we have today and utilize that to bring the change through the legislature and get measures on the governor's desk. I appreciate the seminar I've gotten today. I've heard from many. I've listened to just about the whole thing, except for some technical issues with the internet. The internet went out in my office, so I had to run home here to get online and to hear most of it. Luckily, I'm only 15 minutes away from work, so but I'm heading back. And while I appreciate everything that's been said, I'm going to sign off. And let me just say, we can't do our work in the legislature without advocates, certainly inside the legislature, great leaders like Linda and Ms. Sumter, who's on here, and others. Certainly leaders like Governor McGreevey and Senator Lesniak, of course, with a long distinguished career. And quite frankly, this institute is a testimony to the great service that he has rendered to our state over many decades and continues to do now in retirement from elective office. But he's out there working and pitching, thank goodness, because we need him and people like him to pull this wagon of ours, pull our state forward. So I'm signing off. Enjoy the rest of the day, everybody, and stay well.
Thank you, Dr. Conaway, and thank you for highlighting the importance of science. As somebody who is trained as a scientist, that sort of makes me kind of crazy that nobody else seems to think that it's important.
Well, a lot of people do, just not as many as we'd like sometimes.
Yes. So we have not heard yet from Reverend Grayson, who I think can kind of pull a lot of this together for us. Reverend Grayson, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, I am. I believe I am unmuted. First, I want to say, again, thank you for this event. And there's some people on the panel that I work with regularly. I want to say thank you to Councilman Perkins, who won the election yesterday. She's my councilwoman. Also to Governor McGreevey, who is a co-laborer with us in the city of Elizabeth, dealing with reentry initiatives. But there's a couple of things that I want to speak about that reflect a lot of what we have been saying. As president of the NAACP, I'm also the reentry coordinator for the city of Elizabeth, and I'm also a professor at Kean University. And so I work with a lot of the students there, and I get a lot of conversation with them about what their thoughts are and why in many cases they seem to lack in action in some of the areas where they could really have impact. And one of those areas I believe that I try to promote and watch out for is monitoring outcomes, right? While New Jersey over the past few years has done many things. And so while I have a side where I agree with Councilman Perkins, I also know that over the last few years, we have been very active in trying to solve a lot of these problems, right? We've had expungement laws constantly moved down. They had 10 years and then they went to special circumstances, and then they moved it down to 6 years. And so there's money out there for us to work with people who are getting expunged. They have banned the box quite a few years. There's a lot of criminal justice reform activity going forward. And so I appreciate many of the people who are working in that area, trying to make sure that these rules and these regulations and these policies are being enacted. But there was something that Senator Greenstein mentioned that was really important. And she said the real root of the issues. That was part of the question. And the real root of the issues is not in constantly regulating and making new policy. Part of it is simply enforcing the policies that are already in existence. I'll give you an example, give you a couple. One, right? We have the Fair Chance Housing Act, right? Where criminal record can't be used to determine whether or not you can be rented space. We know that may be law, but we know that's not enforced. As a reentry coordinator for the city of Elizabeth, I deal with it every day, right? I've got to go sometimes to a place where individuals won't rent because the person is African American and they're using criminal background as a reason not to, right, rent them. I have had circumstances where the landlord took the person's property, and I called the police, and the police were fighting with me, like they didn't understand that the law was being broken, right? So we have these rules, right, that are not being enforced, right? You take, again, when you talk about education, you look at the Armstead Act, right? Now, the act was passed in 2002. Here it is 18 years later, and it still has not been enacted. Now, there is a great conversation going on with the Board of Education. There are some people who are now stepping up to the plate to try to get this done, but they want us to take it slow and take it easy and try to figure out how to do it. We're already 18 years overdue. So I'm looking at outcomes, right? I want to see, like, Tyrone Barnes was talking about, like Alexander Shalom was talking about, right? Or even Governor McGreevy when he was talking about accountable benchmarks, right? One of the things that I have to say bothered me the most about George Floyd was not the actions of Officer Derek Chauvin, it was his attitude. His attitude suggested that he could do what he wanted to do and there would be no accountability. When you look at Arbery in Georgia, Ahmaud Arbery, right? The prosecutors themselves did not want to prosecute a fellow detective investigator, and they recused themselves off the case as opposed to following their oath and investigating the crime and arresting him based on information and evidence. Right. So while we are making all of these rules and while we are making all of these new policies and while we're talking about that, part of my job as the NAACP president working with the state and the national is to make sure we monitor these outcomes. Right. We're talking about police brutality. Right. They're coming out with all of these new rules. The Attorney General has come out with this excellent policing policy. OK, that's fine. Right. But we need to see outcomes. Right. When you talk about young people not voting, they're not voting based on one premise, that they don't believe it matters. They don't believe that the people in office are doing the job that they need to do to protect them and their families. Now, you may have many other contributing factors, but that is the primary reason they don't vote. In the city of Elizabeth yesterday, the beginning numbers had 75% of those who voted over 55. Even after weeks of passionate protests, they still didn't vote because in the end, they don't believe that all that marching means anything. They were there because of the emotion of the moment. They were there because of the passion of the moment. But in the end, they didn't go to the ballot box because they didn't believe the things that are being passed are actually going to be enforced. So while I applaud all of the things taking place, right? We don't just need to pass more housing laws. We need to make sure that they're enforced. We don't need, to earn your way, right? Is that going to be equitable? We know that 55 to 60, 65% of the people in jail are African-American or minority, right? But they have these mechanisms, good behavior. Now, we know how that can be construed, right? To charge somebody with something so they don't have good behavior. So now all of a sudden, when it comes to time to being released, right? Even though you got 50, 65% African-American, you're going to see 50 to 65 of the people being released being white, right? So again, these policies, right, are fine. I applaud them and I promote them. But as Governor McGreevy said, what are the accountability benchmarks? How are we going to make sure that if the police put somebody else in a chokehold tomorrow, right, they're actually going to be, or they're actually going to find punishment, or, so that's what I'm looking for. And I believe that's what your young people, your next generation leadership, the people who are simply dismissing themselves from the public sphere because they don't believe their actions are going to have any impact. And this,
Reverend Grayson, I think that is such a perfect way to kind of bring this particular conversation to a close. I know that the concept of this was not simply to talk about issues, but to develop an action plan to actually address those issues. And I think Sarah will be able to talk to us about what those next steps are.
thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Loretta. And thank you to all of our panelists who have said such amazing, I'm sorry, Senator Lesniak, do you want to say something?
Yes, I do want to give Senator Greenstein a chance to speak because she was mentioned by a couple of our speakers. I wanted her to respond. Senator Greenstein, can you talk? Are you still there? Yes, no? No?
Yes.
Senator Greenstein?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I just wanted to very briefly respond, especially to Councilwoman Perkins August, if I have the right name, and also to Reverend, the last gentleman who spoke. What is your last name, sir? But it was mostly to the Councilwoman.
Grayson.
Yeah, it's always awkward in these calls because someone else is saying something and you're kind of going like this and wanting to respond. But I want to assure you that the fact that we're having these hearings is a recognition that we absolutely think there are problems here in New Jersey. We're not trying to say there aren't any. And I'm going to be careful about using that Ferguson thing again, because I think you're right about that. I think, we have other problems. We may not have had a Ferguson, but we certainly have lots of problems. There are lots of important issues, and that's the reason we're having the hearing. So I look forward to airing the issues and having people on all sides of the problem. And I'd also like to encourage people. We're starting the hearings on July 15th. There will be an opportunity to get in there remotely and, to express your thoughts. You can also send your thoughts. So we can get more information to Loretta and then she can get it out to you.
Okay.
But I want to thank you all very much.
Just one thing, Senator Lesniak, Senator Greenston, driving while Black on New Jersey Turnpike was a national epidemic. What, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
About 20.
Right, about 20 years ago. So to have hearings again after 20 years, we still having the same systemic issue, and that's why it's systemic, because it's not going away. You think you dealt with it and you made it to the public and went national, and then here we are 20 years later still dealing with that. So that's why I said we got to dig a little deeper and say, hey, okay, we have a fundamental, our foundation in New Jersey has shifted because of the history. We dealt with driving while Black. We made that, it was a national thing.
Yes.
And so to have hearings, again, we're just running in circles. And I understand it, but it's still the same issue because we have-
Councilwoman, you're 100% right. And by the way, that's why we're here today. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
And that's why we're here today, to bring accountability in place. Thank you for raising that issue. And Senator Greenstein is going to be on top of it as well. I guarantee you. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sarah, let's wrap this up. Sarah.
All right. You got it. Thank you, Senator Lesniak. And like I was saying before, we have such an amazing panel of speakers here today. And we've really talked about the whole gamut of issues within systematic inequities in our society. And I think that everyone who has attended this meeting today has an idea of a couple of different actions that they can take. So I just want to encourage you all to join our social justice network. If you've registered for the event, we already have your email and we'll invite you to do that. The point of it is to make sure that this is not just a moment in time, that we carry this forward, that it's a movement, that we have the accountability, for those in high places of power, and that we're able to support them, and that we're able to support you. So the goal here is to just carry this forward, make it into a movement, and we want to be able to connect you with all of our panel here, as well as the Human Rights Institute at Kean and the Lesniak Institute. We're here for you, and we want to create this systematic change that we keep talking about today. Again, for those of you who haven't registered, the link is lesniakinstitute.org/SJ network. I'll put it in the chat, and we'll also put it on the Facebook Live for people who are there. And now I'll turn it over to you, Senator Lesniak.
Thank you. As everyone knows, I am wildly optimistic about life and about things. This forum has exceeded my wildest expectations. So I want to thank everybody. We have a lot of work to do. Enough talk. We've got the talk that was necessary. Now we have to take action, and we're going to stay on top of things. We'll be in touch with everybody. Have a great time. Stay safe. Be well, and we'll see you next time. God bless everyone.
Thank you.